Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to show everybody how to refill these standard 1-pound propane cylinders that we all use in our blind heaters and those kinds of things. I'm going to show you how you can refill that out of a standard 20-pound gas grill propane bottle. So stay tuned. So before we get started here, I will mention that on the back of each one of these propane cylinders is a warning saying that you should not refill these cylinders. So I kind of put that in the same category as the tags on your mattress telling you you're not supposed to tear them off and you face federal prison and all these fines if you do that. But just thought it was worth mentioning, so proceed with caution if you choose to do this on your own. Okay, so to get started with, one of the things we're going to need is a scale. So I'm just using the same meat scale we use when we're cutting up deer meat and processing. And so these bottles have a net weight of 16 ounces or 1 pound. So this bottle is completely empty. We'll drop it on the scale there. So yep, we are right at a pound. So the reason we're going to do that is so we need to try to get it as close to 1 pound net weight of propane in there. So we're going to have to take this bottle up to 2 pounds. And so we'll just kind of weigh it in between and get it as close as we can there. All right, so to get started, we're going to take our full 20-pound gas propane grill bottle here. Make sure your valve is off. This is the refill hose that I got off Amazon. They're only like $20. I'll put a link down in the description, but essentially it's got our standard propane bottle fitting on this side and then a small fitting for the 1-pound cylinders here. The nice thing about this setup is it has the valve here, so we can turn the feed for the propane on and off to the small cylinder without having to do anything on the bottle itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this fitting, get it screwed onto our main 20-pound bottle. Make sure that's on there good and firm. Make sure that your valve is in the closed position. Then you can slowly open your 20-pound bottle. And then once we get that open, we're going to invert the tank here so the flow of propane comes out easier. So I'm just going to tip this guy upside down on my bench. So now we've got our hose all ready to go. Propane here. The next step in the process is on these empty cylinders, they're always going to have a little bit of air pressure left over in them, even after your heater's fizzled out and ran out of propane. There's still going to be some air pressure build up in each of these cylinders, and it's going to fill a lot faster and a lot fuller if we bleed that air off. So what I'm doing is just taking a tiny Allen wrench. Essentially, there's two ways to bleed air off of these cylinders. There is the main valve in the center of the cylinder, and there's just a little push down valve there. And then there's this little nipple bleeder valve here on the side, and that one you actually have to pull out to get it to bleed. For this process, it's easy just to use an Allen wrench and push down on that main valve in the center of the cylinder. And this one, I don't hear any air coming off of that one. So this cylinder, we'll go ahead and put this in here and see if we can bleed off any air pressure on there. There was just a little hiss. So both of these have the air pressure bled off of them. So now we'll move on to the next phase of filling them. So I'm going to take the empty cylinder, go ahead and thread it onto the end of the filling hose here. Make sure that's on there good and tight. And then I'm actually going to keep the level of the bottle below the bench height here so it flows a little more freely out of the tank into the small one here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the valve on this propane cylinder. And you can actually hear the propane going into the empty cylinder right now. So this first time when we open the valve is when we're going to get the most bang for our buck as far as the amount of propane that's going into the tank. Each subsequent one hereafter is going to take a little bit more, so we're going to have to bleed off some excess air and those sorts of things. So I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to show you a couple of different ways, or a couple of different methods on how to do this. So this first one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this kind of run its course here until I don't hear any more propane flowing from the big tank into the little tank, which it sounds like it's pretty much done now. So I'm going to close that valve. I'm going to take this bottle off. And you'll get just a little bit of hiss when it comes off of the fitting there. And so now we've got a little bit of propane in here. I'm going to turn my scale back on and we're going to take a look at it here and see. Okay, so with that first fill, Now we are up to 1.35 pounds. In order to fit more propane in here, we've built up some air pressure above the level of the liquid propane. So we're going to bleed some of that excess air off of the top of the bottle using the same method with a Allen wrench here. So I'm just going to put this on top of there, and I'm going to give it 6, 7, 8 blasts of air coming out of here. So we'll just start that. And so what that's doing, that's just relieving that excess air pressure that's built up above the level of the liquid propane. You would think that that would be a really strong propane smell, but it's mostly air since all the propane is liquid and at the bottom of the cylinder. I'm just bleeding air off. I've got a really faint hint of a propane odor, but not like you would think. But on that note, you'll notice over my shoulder back here, I do have the shop door cracked. You do want to do this in a well-ventilated area, just because you will have a little bit of propane bleed off here and there. So now I'm going to take my bottle, I'm going to put it back on the main cylinder, and we're going to repeat the process here. So I can feel, I've got my hand on the bottle, and I can feel the propane working its way into the small cylinder. Now on the second, third, and fourth attempts at this, it's not going to get as much propane going down into the tank as what we got on that first fill, where we had basically a third of our 1 pound go in. So this process can be a little repetitive. It might take 4, 5, 6 attempts at taking it off, weighing it, bleeding the excess air off the top of the cylinder, and repeating the process before you get close to that 2 pound mark. The 2 pounds total, 1 pound of propane and 1 pound cylinder. So that's about done there. I'm going to go ahead and close my valve. You always got to make sure you close the valve. You'll know right away if you didn't. You'll end up with propane squirting everywhere. So let's go ahead and see what weight we came out to on this round. So we were at 1.35 on the first one, and now we are at 1.55. So we got another 0.2 pounds in there. So we're about halfway there. Again, we got to bleed that excess air off if we're going to fit any more propane in the cylinder. So I'm going to give it a few short blasts here. Reattach it to our fitting here. Okay. So now we're going to do round 3, 1.65. So you can see how we're kind of, as the cylinder fills with more liquid propane, we have less airspace to fill, so the process gets slower. So we're at 1.65. Try it again. So this will be round 4 using this method here. 1.8. Okay, this is round number 5. Should be pretty close on this one if we got a good fill. So there we are. So that one, 1.95 pounds, that's close enough for me. The next method I'm going to show you is another one that is a little bit different in style, and essentially I'll explain here. What we're going to do is we're going to hook up the cylinder the same way we were before. The only difference is instead of taking the bottle off, bleeding the air, putting it back on, what we're going to do is we're going to leave the cylinder connected, and I'm going to use this small pair of it's a needle nose pliers, but it's got a bend in it, sort of like forceps. And I'm going to use that to grab a hold of this bleeder valve here, and I will get a hold of it and lift up on it, and I will use that as a way to kind of on the fly bleed air off of the tank, so that way we're not having to take it on and off the fitting quite so often. So we're going to start the exact same way. I'm going to go ahead and connect this guy up to the big tank. Make sure we get that on there good. I'm going to start step 1 the same way. So now the cylinder is kind of at its peak right now there. So what I'm going to do is put this on my knee over here. I'm going to go ahead and shut my valve off, because if we start bleeding this as propane's coming in right here, it's going to have a tendency to just want to blow right out of there. So we're going to temporarily shut this off, leave it connected. I'm going to grab my pliers here, and I'm going to just pull up on this nipple bleeder valve and start bleeding some of the air right off the top of the cylinder. I'm just going to hold up on that. It doesn't bleed near as fast as the last method where we were bleeding it directly off that main valve off the top. It's not as fast as that, but the time we save not having to disconnect and reconnect the bottle is really what we're going for there. So, okay. So now I'm going to open the valve, let some more propane go down in there. So you can kind of see how much quicker, especially if you're doing 6 or 8 of these, that's a really fast way to bleed the air off without having to connect and disconnect. I'm going to go ahead and shut it off. Now that we've got more propane in there, we actually want to try to make this valve be kind of the uppermost part. So I'm going to kind of turn the bottle so it's at a little bit of an angle. That way this valve is kind of at the very uppermost portion of the tank. And then I'm going to go ahead and bleed some more air off. Okay, and we'll do another round of filling here. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up, do another bleed of air here. Okay. Do another fill here. So I think this is what, the third round on this one so far, but we haven't had to disconnect it yet. But we also haven't weighed it yet, so we're kind of ballparking on where we're at for propane fill. Okay, I'm going to shut the valve off, and I can kind of feel, even with the hose attached, it you know, obviously kind of skews my hand scale here, but it feels like it's pretty full. So I'm going to make sure my valve's off. I'm going to go ahead and take this cylinder off, and we'll see how close we are to our 1.95 pounds, which is kind of what we were looking for there. So we were at 0.9 or 0.95, and yeah, we're at 2.35. We actually got quite a bit in that one. So that's the downside of doing it without weighing it in between, is you're not exactly sure where you're at. I probably could have skipped and just done 2 fills or 2 bleeds and fills in between, and we probably would have been about right. So yeah, it's a lot quicker. I think you can actually get more propane in there doing it this way than you can the other way. So with that, I've got those 2 cylinders done. Just always remember, take your propane bottle, and always remember to shut off the main valve on the top of your cylinder there. And you can take this off if you want. Just be cautious. Right now, this line is charged with propane, so if I take this off, we're going to get some propane blasting back off. But since I know I'm going to be filling some more of these yet this winter, I'm just going to leave this attached, and we'll just kind of set it aside for right now and come back to it later when we need to fill some more propane bottles. So that's an easy way to do that. So just some kind of quick math on there. I think at Menards, these tanks full run somewhere around $5 to $6, depending on when you get them, where you get them, whether you're getting the 11% rebate, what have you. So just for math's sake, let's say it's $5 and we've got 1 pound of effective propane usability out of this. So this is a 20-pound propane cylinder. In most cases, these are going to have 17 to 18 pounds of usable propane in them. And again, depending on where you exchange your propane cylinders, you're going to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 bucks, like at Menards, to exchange an empty cylinder like this with a full one. So we're getting, you know, essentially, let's call it, even if conservatively, if we had 15 bottles of our 1 pounders, if we could fill 15 of them out of this for 20 or 25 bucks, that would be 75 bucks if we went out and bought the same 15 cylinders. So it's basically a third of the price, depending on how you do the math. That is how to refill your propane cylinders on the cheap and stay warm over these winter months when you're out there getting it done. So with that, that's all we got. Have a good one, folks.